started here as a student many moons ago. I don't know how long ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
She went through kind of partly her DPD here, but then finished that up at UNC. That's right. Got her master's here, and then is currently in the DI future.
Sodexo.
Sodexo. Ooh,
yeah, it's okay.
But during all that time, or a lot of it, she also worked at UNC School of Public Health in the area of nutrition. She'll tell you a lot more about that. But just got some really incredible insight and experience in the world of research and collecting dietary data and those sorts of things. So she's here to sort of address that and some issues of research and research design. And 2 minutes on doubly labeled water because she has some experience with that. So sort of let's take it away. I'll be back in a couple seconds.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, even though it is hot in here. Normally I'm like, whew, a little warm. But, so right, and I can open up to questions at the end as far as like what I do. But in the interest of time, we're just gonna kind of get on with this fun lecture, I think. I'm gonna go over information about how to make sure you can have a successful research. And then also speak about diet assessment methods. Before we begin, how many of you have been a part of a research, either done research yourself or worked on a research team? All right, few people, okay, good, that's good. You're gonna hopefully help us with some things as we go along. For those of you that have raised your hands, was any of it related to diet? Yeah, okay, good. Might be picking on you later. No, I'm just kidding. All right, well that's good to see and hear, or see. All right. So what we're going to do today is, again, just quickly go over some key things about making sure when you get going with your research project or your diet assessment project that you're a success. So we're going to go over some certain things about planning. And again, we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about some of the diet assessment methods. And I have some kind of not crazy activities, but just a few things that we can do to help get it in our head or whatever. And then we're going to open it up and have discussion and and talk about it. As we go through, if I go through something too quickly or you have a question, it's pretty laid back, so just let me know. All right, so as an outline for research, basically this is just a quick outline, what you need to do. And how many of you are going to do an actual original research before I sort of to graduate? Are you guys all in the master's program? All right, yeah. How many of you are going to do an actual research project, or do they sort of structure it differently such that you don't have to do that? No, nobody's going to do it, or do you not know yet? How many do not know? Okay, that's all right, that's all right. You're probably like, what? I have to do something? No. Some projects, sometimes you can do an actual data collection with real people. Sometimes you can just look at data. And sometimes, I think they have different requirements now where I know Dr. Fisher and Landis will be able to help you with whatever the requirements are. I know they're different. So anyway, we're going to go over, so things that the basic outline is you want to create your project. There are some times in some situations that you may have to secure funding. So you can pay for things like incentives for the participants and stuff like that, maybe the software, maybe other people to help you collect the data, whatever it is. So you're going to create the project, secure the funding, you're going to submit the plan, and don't be offended if they send it back to you and it has to be revised. We're going to talk about preparing, and then a little bit about conducting in-field research and post-research. So this probably is just going to highlight those two things that we're going to, of all of these things, we're really going to focus, as far as the research methods, we're going to really focus on the creating the project and the preparing piece. All right, so I had to do this presentation. I had to back it down for a webinar, a national webinar I did through Family and Consumer Sciences, which is what I got my undergrad in education. But so I did this giant presentation. It was kind of neat to do a webinar, and they didn't want it related to diet, so I had to back it down. And anyway, in the process, I found this information by DePoy and Gitlin, and it was kind of really just, to me, I was like, that's perfect. This you know, when you talk to somebody, it's not like you want to talk to a kindergartner. You want it to be logical and clear, and this is what these folks said about research. It needs to be understandable. You need to be able to confirm that things happened or didn't happen, and it needs to be useful. Like, you know, you need to justify, and hopefully you can sell why you want to do certain types of research. All right, so with that, to get us started, and when we were starting to create our project, one thing that you may want to do, and again, it depends on what you have to do or what you're interested in doing, but a lot of times, and I get folks at UNC that'll come to me and we just want to talk about ideas. So it's kind of neat. In fact, I went to lunch with a new faculty and we just chatted about, we're actually trying to get her to speak for the core that I work for. And it's kind of good just to get the juices flowing. So I was like, I want to meet with you quarterly. Let's go to lunch. So one of the things you want to do is figure out what this great idea is. And again, you may want to talk with your associates or your classmates, talk to your advisors. If you want to get in touch with folks at NC State or UNC, they're there, Duke. You're definitely going to have to do a lit search, and I don't know if you're like me, but I'm not really crazy about writing. But you have to do it, and it's really good because basically it says, I've got this information in my head. I know what I'm talking about. I know why I want to do this type of research. And you may have to correspond or interview with experts. And when we get to the short bit about doubly labeled water, I'll share with you some of my experiences. It was when I was early on. So other things that you're going to want to consider when you're creating your project is your recruitment plan. And again, I'm speaking to research and project and successful research as it relates to doing actual research in the field with people. So just sort of take that with a grain of salt. So you're going to want to address a recruitment plan and expect that you're going to want to over-recruit. Because they're going to say they're going to want to do this, and then when they get down to brass tacks, they won't do it. And in fact, when I speak to a lot of investigators and their study coordinators, they're like, yeah, we're going to get this many people in, and I'm like, okay, you know. I'm like, I hope so, but the reality is it doesn't really happen that way. You may have to consider working with a budget, and if you're not good with numbers, you will be good with numbers by the end of it. You're going to have to manage your overall budget, your study budget, as it relates to incentives, again, the cost of the tool, and possibly an analysis. I think you all have to take statistics to graduate. However, that doesn't mean that you are a statistician. And so getting that help from somebody, it's worth paying the money. You may have to deal with staffing. Generally, it might be at your level to graduate. That wouldn't really be something that you would have to deal with. But something such as an FTE, a full-time equivalent, you may have heard of that. That's a staffing, that's a budget issue. And then this is sort of important, and I had this on the slide, and I was like, what was I trying to say here? And I was like, oh yeah, you want to, when you're looking at doing research, whether it's diet or anything, you want to basically be an anthropologist. You want to know, what is this culture I'm going to look at? Are you going to go look at the Lumbee Indians somewhere in North Carolina? You're going to realize that they don't all eat, you know, what would be something, you know, maybe something that somebody would eat in Boston. You know, I mean, so there's big differences, and that's some of the things that we're going to look at as we go through this here, is you want to look at the culture, the language, and the resources. So it might be pie in the sky, and nutrition is good, and food and nutrition is a good message that we want to put out as nutritionists, but you have to be realistic about the message that you're trying to put out there and the research that you want to do. And so by looking at this qualitative assessment, that's going to allow you to understand what will really be accepted by your population. All right, so a few other things with regard to getting yourself going. You want to take a look at your goals and objectives are basically going to predict and dictate where you go with your project. That's like the title of the book, okay? It'll dictate the study design, if you're going to do an FFQ versus a 24-hour recall, and we're going to talk about those types of methods shortly. It's going to address your study population or your sample size, what other measurements you may have to do, ethical considerations and such. And a few things that you may want to keep in mind. Historical data would be something like written records. Descriptive is something where you observe, say, discrete data. So you're making observations. Versus analytical would be you're just looking at numbers and you're analyzing it. And then another type of a study is something called experimental, where you're looking at cause and effect. Just sort of some terminology and stuff. All right, so moving on to, we've got our project, we feel ready to roll. We've gotten the blessings from the school or our institution. We've got some funding, hopefully. It's submitted. We're good to go. Okay, good. Now we want to prepare. One of the things you're going to want to look at doing, so your prepared project is a lot of paperwork, and it's a lot of work. And then you're not done, though. Okay. What you want to do is create something what's called a manual procedures, also called a standard operating procedure. And that's not something that the reviewers are going to look at or the funders are going to look at per se. They just want to know, okay, give us the bare bone facts. You can do this. All right, now go out the door and go do it. Now you go out the door and you go do it, and you want to have the most detailed list or information of what is actually going to happen. And I've been on projects with people nationally and even locally at UNC, and I'm like, do we have this written down? And not to sound like Nazi, but you can't if you make assumptions that something is going to happen, you're already sort of in an error. You're going to make assumptions that you're my staff over here, you're working for me, and we're going to go to the clinic and we're going to interview people. It's good to just, even if you don't have every little thing written down, every script written down, that you have a checklist of what you're going to do before you leave. That kind of thing. All right, so that's your manual procedures. And it is the detailed nuts and bolts of your project. Okay, so hopefully you're getting what I'm putting down here. It also will include something about quality assurance, something that says, I'm going to go through all this effort, and I'm going to have double checks on what I'm doing. I've worked for some studies where you enter data, and they want you to go back and re-enter it. And what they do is they compare to see if we're all human, and that's why there's erasers on pencils, but they want to see, I entered it once, does it match up? Is everything matching up? For 24-hour recalls, which I'm going to talk to you shortly, I just was on the phone with an investigator from Duke, and she goes, what do you do are you monitoring your calls, or you tape recording your calls? What are you going to do, or what are you doing to ensure that your data is quality? All right? So that's something that we're going to want to keep in mind. Included in the manual procedures or some other area, you're going to want to talk about your recruitment strategy. Are you going to have your friends go out and post signs up at the library, the coffee shops, at the laundromats? Where's this going to go? Are you going to do, what is it called when you have an announcement like on the WPTF or something like that? What's it called, a NSA? What's it called when you, PSA? I'm like, it's something SA. All right. Data storage. This is huge. Like, there's so many parts of getting a study going that it just, I could go on and on about it. But data storage is very important. Where are you going to keep your data? And how are you going to de-identify it? What's your name?
Kirsty.
Kirsty?
Kirsty.
Christy?
Kirsty.
Kirsty. Thank you. So Kirsty gives me her information. I want to make sure that when I am talking to you or talking about you to my associates, that you're just a number. Okay? I can't tell you how many times people have sent me emails and they've included name, phone number, and an email. I'm like, no. Talk to me about IDs, because these people have signed up and they want to keep their information private. We've done studies on eating disorders to all kinds of stuff. So that's a HIPAA concern. That's an IRB concern. So you want to talk about where you're going to keep your storage and how you're going to keep it safe. And if you don't know much about IT or information security, again, and maybe you don't know much about budget, you're going to learn, okay? And speak with your folks at the institution that you're working in. They will help you as far as encryption and levels of security, and that's very important. There have been institutions that have gotten in big trouble because they didn't ensure some security. And I'm talking about security, but data storage, so that's huge. One last thing you may want to entertain doing is do a dry run. Like, you have this, again, your roadmap, you think you know what you're going to do, play it out. You think it's going to take 10 minutes to do an interview with a person, you come in, they're trailing with their 3 kids, you know what I mean? And it's just not going to do a real live simulation and dry run it. All right? Okay. I referred to the Institutional Review Board. It's short for it's long for IRB. That's an organization that makes sure that you're not doing really weird things to people, okay? Like that's a common way of saying, you know, a long time ago when we had Hitler, they did some wacky experiments on people. I mean, that's why we have the IRB now, so they can't do that kind of stuff. People sign up, there's full disclosure of what exactly is going to happen, okay? In some organizations, and I know at UNC, myself and my staff included, have to go through this city training. And again, basically, it's an online training on issues related to human subjects. It's originally run out of the University of Miami. I'm just reading this. And the content was developed by a national consortium. It has information about informed consent, as I mentioned, vulnerable populations, so that would be folks like, you think, oh yeah, I can go to the prison and go interview these people. You really can't. Those people are, you know, just because they're an enclosed population, that would be considered possibly a vulnerable population. Ethical principles and other IRB regulations. So these are some things that if you haven't heard of these words, you're gonna, you will become exposed, and hopefully when you have a conversation with somebody, you'll be like, I know what I'm talking about. I heard that. And that's hopefully the goal of this presentation, is that I'm going to give you some knowledge so that you can have at least a good conversation with other folks and amongst yourselves. And I touched on security, so we're not going to talk about that much more. Except one more thing to say, that a lot of times we're mobile with our phones and our laptops. You want to make sure, again, that you take these instruments and these tools to your IT folks and make sure you're okay to use this sort of stuff. I know with my team, we all have Gmail and we G-chat each other, and we have our UNC email. My staff is absolutely not allowed to communicate anything work-related other than maybe scheduling through Gmail. It's just a rule, and it's not a rule I made up. UNC made that rule up. So we follow the rules. That's why they're there. We don't want to be read about, basically the way it goes. Okay, so now we've commenced with our field research and what's going to happen. You may have to make modifications, and this is where that manual procedures comes in handy, because things happen, and you want to identify, okay, on October 24th, I had to totally change some stuff. I had to back my study down, I had to stop it, and resubmit to the IRB office, okay? When did you don't go off of memory. I don't know if you're like me. I'm getting old. I can't remember what I did yesterday. And we'll talk about that when we get to DIE assessment. So journaling along the way and tracking what significant events that happen in your MOP is going to be very helpful. You want to meet your timelines. If you can't meet that date with your professor, the funding agency, give them a quick call. Say, hey, you know what? I know this is due. I'm working on it. And just tell them, all right? And they'll appreciate that much more than you thinking it's gonna go away, because it won't. All right, correspondence. You may have to correspond with the participants along the way. There may be a halfway point where you can send out an update, you're doing a great job, don't forget, or funding agency reports. Motivating participants, that's huge. You wanna you've done a lot of work to get where you are. You wanna make sure that you have a high response rate. And that's really a big challenge with working in real people studies, so live studies. Recruitment screeners, this is huge. What I'm talking about here is you have a certain criteria of folks that you are going to allow in your study. So you want to make sure that the right folks are coming in, and also you're screening for somebody that's not going to really, you can tell when people aren't going to show up or do follow through. And realize when you're going to have to cut your loss, okay? How are we doing so far? You guys are like, I'm ready to go. Just kidding. All right, it's a nice day, so we're going to, okay. Okay, IRB and amendments. That may happen if you have significant changes. Working with a team, I like working alone, but I also love working with my team. My team, thankfully, make my job so much easier, and I trust them, okay? So a lot of what you may encounter with doing real live research is a big growth for you. And what I found personally with working with my team is having frequent, regular meetings has been just a great, great thing. Working with a participant, however, you just want to be careful that you're not imparting some bias. Did you ever do a live interview with somebody? Any of you do a live interview with somebody? You may have done it, and just it wasn't like for research. Did you ever say, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Like my face and body is going, yeah, of course I know what you're talking about. You know, so you give them that like stink eye or your body or your language can really impart, you know, a response from people. So you always have to be careful. Fortunately, which is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing, when we do our 24-hour recalls, we're over the phone, which sometimes could be a good thing and sometimes not a bad thing. It can be a bad thing. You want to establish trust and a rapport, but you also don't want to exchange phone numbers and go out for a beer later. You know, you got to be able to draw the line. And I've had that happen. I'm like, let's get back to what we need to get going here. All right, know when to cut your loss. And I talked about that earlier with regard to screening and recruitment. And be careful about your communication rules. Again, check with your IT folks and your IS people. And during field research, it's very important that you're following your rules with regard to standardization. Don't go making something up along the way. All right, this is very, very important. All right. And that would also be resolving unknowns. When we work on some food projects, we may come across many foods that we need to resolve. We're just making a laundry list. It was they didn't eat the crust, we subtracted 3/8. They put milk, we put unknown. Follow your rules and keep with them, and you're going to be safe on the other end, okay? Post-data collection, we're going to celebrate, we're going to put off some fireworks. We're going to do all that after we analyze our data. And again, your strong suit may not be statistics. That's okay. Don't be afraid to sit down and speak with your statistician and ask the questions that you might feel are really dumb. Everything's a learning curve. And I'll be honest, I sit there and I'm like, you know, I may look like the biggest dodo, but I'm just going to ask these questions. And you know, and oftentimes you should be working with somebody that they're really good to work with. Okay. I spoke about data storage, but lastly, you want to just see how long should I keep my data? How long do I keep the participant names? I think I know at least the rule at UNC is once that study has commenced, is over, that data has got to go away. You're not allowed to keep any participant information. And I'm kind of glad because we're getting really full at our place. When you get to writing the paper, it's very, very, very important that you recognize the funding source. Can't speak about that enough. That's why we get continued. You guys are all sitting here and taxpayers. You give to these funds. You give to the National Institutes of Health. You don't even know you do that. You give to NIDDK. You don't even know you're doing that. And so what the NIH wants, the National Institutes of Health want, is they want to be recognized for doing this. So until folks cite, they don't. It's a ding. You're going to write your paper, and then you're going to celebrate. And possibly you may want to give your participants information. When you give them information, again, the cultural sensitivity, the language sensitivity, or the cognitive ability, you want to keep it in language that they're going to understand. Don't start throwing out big words and they're going to, I don't get this. Give it to an 8th grader and see if they can understand what you've put out there. All right? Okay. Now what we're going to do is transition to the 24-hour recalls. But before we get going, if you could just, this is not typical. You can hold on to them, or we can, I'm trying to, yeah, just, everyone gets a half sheet. Yeah. And if you could just slide those back. Just take a minute and go through those. They're matching. And then what we can do, I'll give you a few minutes, and what we'll do is then we'll go over them. Did everyone get one? Okay. Sorry. Did you guys get the slides before? Did y'all get them before? No. Did you? I sent you the slides. Were you able to get them out to this?
Let's just say that they blew up your own blackboard.
Okay.
Very short.
Okay. Sorry, I'm getting you in trouble.
No, they're used to that.
How are we doing? Who's still working? A show of hands. All right. All right, so let's go through these. Hopefully they weren't too difficult. I was kind of having fun doing this. I was like, oh, let's see. Isn't that so weird? You're just kind of a geek up here, huh? All right. Who wants to venture for the number one? Who wants to give a show of hands? Anyone want to volunteer? Okay. F, exactly. 24-hour recall. That would be uses a multiple pass system for data collection. We're going to go through all of this, but we're going to get the juices flowing with this little activity. A food frequency questionnaire. Which one would that be? E, right on. Perfect. All right, we're on a good roll. Looking good. All right, how about number 3? A food record.
Baby.
Yep, B. All right, number 4. Yep. All right, I'm going to want to hear from the back corner over there this time. Number 5. You got it. Oh, man, you got the gold prize so far. Okay. All right, I think we got the rest of them. No, I'm just kidding. All right, number 6. Can I ask you over there in the corner? That corner? It's okay. You're not going to get automatically ejected. H? Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Okay, I was like so excited today. I don't know why. I think it's because I was going to come present here. All right, number 7 in the middle row. Somebody in the middle row feeling brave? I? Not bad, but not it. It's okay. A. That's right. And we're going to talk about that in the last one. Dr. Landis?
Oh, G, sorry.
Dr. Landis, last one is 8, is G, and that's the doubly labeled water. Okay, so I did throw a little trick in there, and that was the objective. The opposite of that, which would be I, is subjective. That's what you answer like, oh, I think she means medium. You have to force people to tell you what you need to hear. So again, this is a skill set that we're going to learn is being assertive. And I had to be assertive today with one of these guys that are working on our projects. All right, so we tested our knowledge. We got the juices flowing. And that's a good segue into the next section, which is types of diet assessments. We're going to go over three of them, 24-hour diet recall, the food record, and food frequency questionnaires, and touch a little bit about paper and online as far as the FFQ. It's short, or it's long for FFQ, if I could speak today. We're going to start with talking about the 24-hour diet recall, and then go, for each of these, we're going to go over pros and cons of each. All right, so the 24-hour recall, unfortunately, or fortunately for me, that's one of the things that I manage at the core. Well, I manage the diet assessment for the core, and I can talk about what I do later, because I think you guys are all like, what? We do diet assessments. And most of our contracts that we have involve doing what's called 24-hour diet recalls. As the name implies, it's a 24-hour diet recall, and the 24-hour period starts at 12 a.m. and it ends at 11:59 p.m. We don't generally deviate from that rule. We've had some investigators come to us and go, can we start at 2 in the afternoon and end at 1:15? You know, I'm like, no. We're going to keep it the same. I mean, honestly, I can't say it like that, because honestly, we'll do whatever the investigator's going to do because they're paying us. But generally, we keep it at that time frame. Usually, these diet recalls are unannounced. However, we have had some projects working with children, toddlers, babies, and such, where they're in school, and it just is it's already a flawed science anyway, but it's very helpful for everyone involved that we schedule those recalls where the mom drops the food record off and the daycare provider completes it and such. The 24-hour recall is very detailed, down to was the butter salted or unsalted, down to what kind of oil did you use in your pancakes, or whatever the case might be. It can be lengthy. If you're talking to a foodie or a lonely person, you might be on the phone for a while. If you're talking to some people where every meal is Mickey D's, that's usually like a 10-minute diet recall. But on average, these calls take about 20 to 30 minutes. It does use a multiple pass approach. And what that means is, and briefly, the first pass is where the participant tells us everything that they had for that 24-hour period. It's a list. As the interviewer, which would be myself or any of my staff, we're quiet. At the very most, we kind of squeak out, anything else at that time? Anything else at that time? We're going to probe them until they say no. And then we get a full 24 hours. And then pass 2 is where we review what we've heard, just to make sure we're on point. Pass 3 is almost like a ping pong game. You really get into it. And you go back and forth with a participant. Okay, so now at 8 a.m. you told me you had coffee with a bagel and an apple. At 8 a.m., where were you when you had this? And then at the coffee, did you add anything to the coffee? And you keep on asking anything else until they say no. You don't assume that they're just drinking black coffee. In fact, you don't make any assumptions. And I have to keep on my team about that we're really being objective and unbiased and such. And so it goes back and forth, and then they tell you what kind of coffee, how much they drank, and the next food, and on and on. So it's very detailed. And then the 4th pass is the last pass, and you basically review in the full amount. You almost sound like you work at McDonald's. And in fact, you got the headset on and everything. I'm laughing now because I just got my headset in for my cell phone. Look at this thing. I'm really excited. I'm going to show you guys. I had to get approval, which I thought was really funny from my boss. Like, maybe that's not, I don't know. But I kind of run the show. This is my headset one. This is what we look like in the office.
All the time.
All the time. So I'm going to be driving around like this. I want a helmet, like Starbucks or something. What? Anyway, so this is what we have in the office. How funny that I have it with me. It just came in. I was very excited. I won't be driving around with it. But so we have all the girls in the office. We have all girls right now. However, I have had some fellows working for me. I really like when guys work for me because they're a different perspective. But so we use the headset. We talk and we read back basically not every little detail, but we hit on the big things and we read back what we heard. And then the last sort of question is, for the amount of food that you told me, was that normal, a lot more, or a lot less? And they tell us. And that's about it. We have an added piece where we can do, we can collect diet supplements, herbals, and botanicals. And we're doing one study. We're doing that for one study. So that's sort of interesting as well. It is interview guided, so you have to take the reins and keep them going. And there is a standardized script, which is important. And again, this is all going to, remember the stuff that we just talked about, creating a manual procedures, getting all this information. And so it can be very detailed. All right. So some of the softwares that you may run into include, and I wrote them down, NutriBase or Nutritionist Pro. Those, I don't know which ones, do you have either?
Pro.
Do you have Nutrition? Okay, perfect. So those are some softwares that are used. If you're looking for software for yourself, for research, make sure you sort of do a Google search for professional diet software, because if not, you may get something that I just really don't know. So you want to look for that. The one that we use at the core, and I'm referring to where I work at UNC, is called Nutrition Data System for Research, or long for NDSR. It's really kind of neat. The actual software that we have, it's very expensive, and it's, if I could say this, and it would mean something, but it's sort of the gold standard software for diet data collection. You know, but that's kind of comical. If you talk to like a doctor, he's like, diet assessment. So anyway, the neat thing here, you can enter brand names, and if you don't know, you're going to default to unknown. You can specify key ingredients, so was it olive oil or was it canola oil, that kind of thing. And the neat thing about NDSR, and I think you can do this with Nutritionist Pro, is if there's a canned food, meaning all you have to do is enter Marie Callender's entree. That's a bad example. Anyway, something where you can't really do a sub out on the oil, you can go in on the back end and sub it out so you get as accurate as possible, right? The method of preparation you want, it will get that information. And so two big things that you need is what is the food and how much did you eat? I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and they're like, yeah, a bowl. Or how much did you eat? They're like, all of it. I'm like, all right, well, help me out here. Was it a cup amount? You know, and then you want to use, like, a cup is about the size of a baseball, you know, so you're going to work with your team to come up with some things. Anyway, so there's many types of software. The neat thing about NDSR is that it does flag for implausible values, so too little or too much. I know when I'm entering a diet recall, which I don't do often for myself, and I enter salsa because I love salsa, I get like, eat too much fatty. It doesn't say that. It just says exceeds maximum amount or something. I'm like, ah. So you just have to put in a note. And coding and nutrient calculations is done automatically. So let's say hypothetically Dr. Landis comes to me and says, Meg, I just got $500,000. I want to do a nice diet recall on some crunchy people out in Chatham County. I want to see what they're eating. Okay. All right, so we're going to do this. And we get going on the data collection, and all of a sudden he goes, you know what? I want my data right now. You know what I say? Run an output. Here you go. That's nice. That's not always going to be the case when you work with some diet assessment softwares. You may have to code it. You may have to run it through the black box and pray to God that it's going to come out right. No, generally it does. So that's kind of a neat feature. If the investigator comes to me and says, hey, I want my data, I'm like, hold it. I'm coming right up. All right, so pros and cons. The pros for doing 24-hour diet recalls is that it's a low participant burden. Pick up, all we have to do is have a phone, or if you do it in person. Okay, so there's not a lot of burden on the participant, and you're only doing one at a time, and that's generally the protocol, is you just do one at a time. I've talked to some folks, and they're like, well, can I tell you what I ate 2 days ago and today? I'm like, no, we're doing one. It captures unique foods that may not be caught in other types of assessments that we're going to talk about shortly, or at least one, and it's convenient, it's easy, you just do it. The cons, however, the negative aspects, is that it can be costly. You have to pay for the interviewer, or your time to do the interview. It doesn't reflect usual intake. What I eat Saturday and drink Saturday is not what I eat and drink on Tuesday, okay? Don't get any ideas. I know you guys are thinking bad. No, I'm just kidding. It may require many days of data collection, all right? So there are some other issues that we want to keep in mind. It is a nice tool, but it can be expensive. To do diet recalls at the core right now, it's $34 per person per recall. I want to do 500 recalls. Bless you. 500 recalls. I want to do 500 participants. I want to get data collection on 500 people. So I'm going to over-recruit, I'm going to get 600. So either way, I'm doing that many, somewhere around maybe 550. I want to do 2 recalls. All right, let's back down on the math. Let's do 500 times 2 is 1,000. That's 1,000 recalls. I want to do it at 2 points in time. That's 2,000 recalls times $34. I don't have that money. But we talked to some people, and they can scratch it together, and they get it. However, with funding, it is the first thing to get caught. What are some other cons about it? This is a con, but usually it's not so much a negative or a weakness as it is for other types, is that it does require the participant to remember things. Now, remember I said, oh, I can't remember what I had to eat or drink yesterday or whatever I did yesterday. If you turn to your neighbor, which we're not going to do right now, and you said, Kirsty? Kirsty. Kirsty says, Meg, what'd you eat yesterday? I'd have to, wow, wait a minute. I got to think about that. And you work up techniques. You say, what did you do yesterday? What time did you wake up yesterday? You kind of probe them on these things, right? So it does require some memory, but it's not as bad as, and we're going to come to shortly. So, and literacy is not an issue, where again, we're going to talk about that could be an issue in other diet assessment methods. Any questions so far? All right. Moving on to food records. In the interest of time, how are we doing? Okay. So a food record, the participant writes the information down. How many of you have ever been in a study where they did diet assessments? Nobody? I was. And it was a bone density study, and I had to write down what I had to eat and drink for 3 days. Day 3, I was like, I do not want to eat. I got to write this down. So, yeah. So that's one thing. What would be an issue, given the 24-hour recall that we just talked about, what is one thing that you can think of that maybe would be an issue with doing a food record? Anyone like maybe come to mind something that would be an issue with dealing with people? Writing things down? Change their diet. Whoever said that. What were you saying?
I was going to say just reading their writing.
Reading? Hello? You know, I work in a hospital right now for my internship. Doctors, writing, script. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't know what's going on. I can tell the lab values when they do the little chart thing. I'm like, all right, I know where to look for glucose, but. All right, so yeah, and somebody else says something in the back over here.
Change their diet.
Exactly. It's change their diet and reading their writing. So there's some issues with that. Also cognitively. Some people don't know how to read and write in this world right now, amazingly. But generally, what we want to do, it's a food record. It's generally for a few days, at least 3 days. It can be up to 7 or more. As it implies, they're going to write down what they ate and drank, so it can modify their behavior. You may have to get somebody to show them whether you're using food models or exactly like how to fill out the form. And like the 24-hour recall, you need a software. And let's see, so let's go on to some pros and cons. We already talked about it. So there is some burden to the participant. And it is a reduced reliance on their memory because they should be writing it down right at that time, but that doesn't always happen. A weakness could be that it modifies the diet, but it also could be a good thing. And if you're trying to reduce intake for people who are obese, or increase intake, which that probably wouldn't work, like say for fruits and vegetables or something like that. So that could be a pro too. There is some cost. The other sort of issue or weakness is that you have to code and you have to do that food matching and enter that food and make sure you have resolutions and food standards set up, okay? Let's see. Just making sure I'm hitting all the points as far as pros and cons. Another pro is that it, and it's not listed here, is that it is open-ended. So you can just sort of write whatever they want, you know? And it's easy to quantify amounts, assuming they put them in. I can't tell you how many food records we've gotten in at the core where they put sandwich. That's it. I don't know how many. I don't know what's in it. Coke. Okay. Diet, regular, flavored, no amount. That's super frustrating. What you want to do if you're ever working with food records, they come in, hopefully you receive them with the participant, or you have the ability to call them, hey, Miss Smith, I have your food record here. Can we go through it? You have a minute? I can't read your writing, or I don't know what the amount is, okay? All right, last set of type of assessments is the FFQ, or the food frequency questionnaire. I'm in food frequency questionnaire misery right now at work, but that's okay. That's why it's job security. A food frequency is basically like a checklist. You know the bubble? We've all done the bubble things. It's the exact same thing. Some instruments are online right now, which is really neat. And basically, what a food frequency is a checklist of all the foods that you ate and drank over an extended period of time. It could be 3 months, it could be a year. So what you're looking at now, compared to a 24-hour recall or a food record, is usual intake. Okay, so that's a nice thing. Maybe you're looking at athletes and you're starting at baseline and you want to see how did they eat over the past year, and then you look at them 6 months from now and you want to see how has their diet changed. This is a nice tool. And furthermore, it's relatively cheap, okay? So it's a, and how it works is you would say, okay, Dr. Landis is doing it, and he says, I eat fruits, dairy products, and vegetables. And then from there, it goes through, we'll start with the fruits. What fruits do you eat? And he marks off probably a lot. And he marks off all these fruits. And then you go through the fruit section, and it says, okay, over the past year, did you eat any oranges? Yeah. How many oranges did you eat during the year? And when you ate them, how many did you eat? You know, that kind of thing. And so really, it's almost an explosion. So for however many foods you eat, it's going to expand out, all right? All right. So it's representative. So there's some part. The thing about this is that it's lengthy. As you can imagine, I did a food frequency questionnaire for my master's thesis to graduate. I found one online. It's called the NCI DHQ, the National Cancer Institute. It was called the DHQ for Diet History Questionnaire. You can Google it. The nice part about this, because I had very limited funds, and most of it went to as incentives for the participants, was that it's free. Nothing's really free. Again, we're probably paying for it, but it's the national. And so my folks, who they were 55 and older, went online and completed this diet history questionnaire, and I have some data from it. It's really kind of cool. So I got to look at it. But it's long. Start to finish, it's about an hour. But you only have to do it once, hopefully. You have to check the data. You have to check to make sure it's complete. If it's online, it's sort of taken care of for you, all right? What other things about, let me just double check. Oh, types of diet history or food, I'm saying diet history questionnaires now. Types of FFQs you're going to come across might be the block would be one. Gladys Block, she created one. Walter Willett is he's out of Harvard. I mentioned the NCI, DHQ, it's also a diet history questionnaire, and the N. Haynes has one, and then HANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, they have one. Okay. All right, pros and cons. There's minimal data entry because things are already coded. They just fill in the bubble, you run it, you get your output file, you're good to go. And like I mentioned, it reflects usual intake. Some of the issues, I may have a hard time remembering what I ate over the past year. But I think the thought is that we're creatures of habit. When it's strawberry season, you're eating strawberries. When it's, winter squash season, you're going to eat winter squash, that kind of thing. So we sort of touched on these. I'm not going to read through them. The only last thing is, I just had a thought and now it left me. Oh well, hopefully it'll come back to me. Yeah, that was it. So the last little thing about a questionnaire is oftentimes the ones that have been validated are for the common population. So again, getting back to our Lumbee Indians, it may not be appropriate for that population or Latino population, or we have a lot of Indian people or Asian people. It doesn't have like kimchi in there, okay? So you just got to keep that in mind. When you look at that questionnaire, you want to be culturally sensitive. Okay, so things, lastly about this, and then I'm not sure if I have time to do my activity because I'm going on an hour. But a few things to consider when selecting the tool of any type, diet or otherwise. Well, diet is included, of course. We talked about all the front-end stuff of it, the easeability, burden, cost, and all that good stuff, and that's good. Like, definitely things you need to keep in mind. But always show people that you're super smart and you want to inquire about the database. You can use a questionnaire that was developed in 1970s, no problem. How current is the database, though? You go to the supermarket, every time you go, there's new formulations, there's new products on the line. So you want to know how savvy, how robust, and how current is that database. Because if you're running a questionnaire, no matter how, and the older the better, quite frankly, you can tweak it and validate it. But if your database is from the 90s, sorry to tell you, it's like 2012. Okay, so we have new foods on the line, new formulations, new products, and all that good stuff. So keep in mind what type of database. If you're looking at computer software, what kind of support is offered? How much is it? Are there new versions? And what are you going to do when the new versions come out in your middle of data collection? You're going to stick with the old one, or are you going to go to the new one? And what are you going to do with the old data? Are you going to rerun it, or how's that going to work? Can I modify it? Is there any modifications, or is it even necessary? That kind of stuff. Again, more stuff with regard to the tool. Is this going to be appropriate for my audience? I want to use an online DHQ, but no one's got computers or internet. Guess what? You're going to have to go to paper. How much does it cost? Are there aids? Do I need a food portion booklet? Do I need to sit down and go over how to enter that food record? And, you know, or if you have the aid, what happens if the participant doesn't use it? Does it make your questionnaire less valid? You know, these are questions you need to ask. I don't know how I'm doing with time, but what we'll do is, what I was going to have you do is go and get into groups and make a list. But let's just open it up. What are some other issues that, given everything that we sort of talked about, that may be a concern when doing diet research or research in general? Are there any things that you guys are sitting there going, what about that? Like, what happens? Anything? Yeah.
Like people that eat out, they might not know what's, like when you're asking them what kind of oils and stuff.
You know, right?
They're not going to know.
Good. So that's when you hope that the database that you're using has an unknown, right? If it doesn't have an unknown, then you just come up with the rules. Like, okay, team, our rule is if they go out to dinner, we're going to assume that it's peanut oil or something, you know, whatever it is. One thing I had, because I've taught this class, or I've done a lecture for nutrition epi at UNC, I have had people ask me, how do you know they're telling the truth? You don't. you really don't. I mean, that's like the flaw of this whole thing. You know, you just hope that you write it in as a natural limitation of your study, okay? But that's where it's really important that you get, you know, all your ducks in line and you feel good about it. And I think if you have a good attitude, things just go better, you know? I found that to be the case. All right, any other things that you're sitting here going, I wonder what would happen? Anything? Okay, just checking. All right. Okay, so this was from actually a nursing website. Some problems that can be applied to successful research. Here you have a disconnect between the proposal and the design. Happens. I'm not going to read through them. Let's see. Sample size, you'd want to speak to your statistician about that. There's like a power number thing. I'm not going there. But a power calculation that says if I'm going to do a research in X study that I have to have this many people, that's called a power calculation. So you can say with confidence that what you've done and you have your right number of numbers of participants. No research protocol description. How are we going to address that? We talked about it earlier. How are you going to address not having a research protocol description? Manual procedure, right? That's the nuts and bolts. I had one investigator, and she came up to me, she said, it's not brain science. I was like, don't insult me. I was like, we make your study successful. So, all right, I'll let you read that on your own time. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to stop right here and quickly talk about doubly labeled water. I have a handout that you can read on your own because there is sort of, you know, it's, well, I'm not giving you enough probably. Okay. Oops, sorry. And I'm going to go down this way. Hopefully I have enough. I don't know how many are in here. Let's throw them down that way. Okay, so doubly labeled water, I had the good fortune, I'm going to say, the good fortune when I very first started at UNC to do this really complex diet assessment. I mean, I'm serious, like it was my first few days at work. It was 2004. It was a rainy day. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was 2004. I mean, I was so excited to be there. And my boss said, we got this grant. We're going to do this study. We're using doubly labeled water, which I had heard about. I was like, 24-hour recalls. We're using camera cell phones, and we're doing this on children ages 5 to 7. I was like, what? I didn't even know what a pencil drawer was, let alone like the fact that I'm going to have to be calling these people about doubly labeled water. So that's a little background. So I rallied. And remember all the things that I talked about that you should do in project planning and project creation? I did it. I was scared. I was calling people. I was like, I read about you. Could you talk to me about doubly labeled water? I have no idea. Anyway, my armpits are sweating. I was like, oh my God. Dale Schuller? Like Dale Schuller. Anyway. All right, so what is doubly labeled water? Doubly labeled water is heavy water. It's deuterium and oxygen 18. And deuterium is the heavy hydrogen. You drink it, and it's like a biomarker. Like, you ever hear when they talk about a biomarker and it traces through your body and either you urinate it or you sweat it out or you know, whatever, they draw blood. It's the same sort of concept. And what it is, in bare bones terminology, this is the gold standard for energy expenditure. Now, we do calculations and we want to figure out what is their energy needs. How many of you guys have done that in your nutrition assessment class? Maybe not yet, okay. You figure out the assessment needs. This is like the high-end version of calculating energy expenditure. You need to have an instrument called indirect calorimetry, and that is where you get a CO2 value. And you also need one other, indirect calorimetry, and there's something else. I'm losing it, but indirect calorimetry and one other thing. Why can't I? It's evading me right now, but anyway, you dose them with the water. You take a baseline before you dose them. You give them a little bit of water, and we gave it to them in Gatorade. So this is like so cool. So we gave it to them in Gatorade, and then we didn't want to get urine samples, you know, but we wanted to get saliva samples, so that's what we got. And they could do it on babies, and they take the diapers. It's crazy. Anyway, so the doubly labeled water, we gave it to them, and it excretes out the body over a period of time. And so we took the samples and we sent them off to Baylor and Dr. Wong, who did his calculations, and we got the CO2, the indirect calorimetry, the RQ values, and we sent it to him, and he did this crazy math magic, and he sent us back their energy expenditure. Now what we did was we compared it to 24-hour recalls. So what's your name? Doretta. We got some like really cool names in here. I mean, like, it's all right. My name's Meg. I'm just kidding. I love it. I love your names. I'm not, you know. All right. All right. So Doretta eats 1,500 calories. Now she gets dosed with the doubly labeled water. What happens is they say Doretta really had 2,000 calories. That's what really happened, based off of the fact that we looked at your energy expenditure. Okay? Does that like kind of? I'm trying to give you like the common sense, like Reader's Digest version, because it is very complex to get into it. Dr. Landis, what else do we have?
So you feed it to them.
Yeah.
They walk around.
They walk free living. That's the other nice thing. Yeah, it's like 14 days, so 2 weeks. And it's a free living measurement, which is really neat. The only problem with doubly labeled water right now, is that there's almost no ability to get it. I imagine there's been some government studies that have been done and they used it all up, or internationally. When we got it in 2004, 500 grams of either the O or the H was like $500 a gram. I'm not joking. I was hanging out with this one guy, dating this one guy, and he was all like into labels. And he was like, I need to get that water. I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. I gotta go. So it's very, very, very expensive. But it's cool because you don't have to go into what's called a bod pod. You guys ever heard of a bod pod? It looks like a giant eggshell, and you sit in it with your like bathing suit on, and you look really weird. It's not like that, okay? But it was really neat to have that experience. And what else are you thinking I should share with them about it?
Well, I mean, you said the key stuff.
I think I said the key stuff.
The best part is you feed it, they run around, and then...
Yeah, they take samples, and if I were to ever do it again, I would want them to come in to give me their samples, because that got a little messed up. Because we had them all labeled, and everything was really like we thought it was all going to work. But you ever meet with somebody and they kind of like, they get the glazed over like, I don't know. And then they go home and they're, you know, spitting in this cup, and it's really supposed to be the day 10 cup, and they're spitting in the day 1 cup. So Dr. Wong emailed me. He's like, these values, they're not right. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, Dr. Wong. Like, they're done. So it was kind of cool.
What was the purpose of this, like,
right.
the study for?
We actually never wrote a paper on it. So the reason we were looking at to see, you know, what was the reason? We had cameras. The kids took pictures of before and after, and then we used those pictures
Like of what they ate?
of what they ate, and then we entered the 24-hour recall based on the pictures. But we took the 24-hour recall like live, and then they had the doubly labeled water. I think we were trying to see, and this is bad that I don't remember it, but it was also 8 years ago. I think we were trying to see if using that camera cell phone was a valid measure for as a tool for collecting diet recalls. And since then, there's been a lot of stuff done with camera cell phones. I mean, really what they need to do is just put a camera in your mouth. Hey, let's be real. Just put a microchip back in there, like right here. You know.
That's going to be my next question. Like, what's the latest technology that had all the money in the world? Accurate.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, smartphones, I mean, they're talking about, you know, I go to some conferences, some scientific conferences, they're talking about like a camera right here, you know, like a necklace type or something. They seriously have talked about a camera in your mouth. I don't know about that. How are they going to attach it? Like put it in your nose or something? What is that? I don't know. What are some other things? I mean, if you had all the money, I mean, I don't know. I think, really where the science is going now is a lot of sort of statistic stuff, where they're taking a 24-hour recall and they're taking an FFQ and they're putting it together mathematically to come up with usual intake. And honestly, they're always like trying to look out. That's why I don't think you were here, but when I said I sat down with a colleague, a new faculty at UNC, she's looking at like obesity and what was her thing? Measurement error or something like that. And I was like, that's so cool. Like, I just love sitting there. I'm like what I do, I feel like I can do well. But when I talk to other people that are super smart, I'm like, let's just hang out. Like, maybe I can get like super smart from hanging out with you. All right. So with this, you want to plan, do, check, act. That's this guy, what was his name? He made it up. And that's sort of the essence of Edward Deming. He made that up. So PDCA, you may see that again. It's sort of like a CQI thing or a quality assurance thing. You're going to plan it out. You're going to do it. You're going to go back, check what's going on, and then you're going to act. And it's a big circle. Okay? All right. So the nice thing about this is when you get done with whatever it is, whether it's research or finishing this master's program or your internship, whatever you're going to do, you're going to have a whole new set of skills. Okay? You're going to know how to manage your time or die. No, I'm just kidding. You're going to be able to public speak like I am right now. If you're not good in financial management, you're going to be able to do that. Interpersonal communication resource. So research is a complex interaction between the researcher and the problem. And here you are. You're the active decision maker. So last few words of encouragement. You got to believe in yourself. I think what I found in my life is I just celebrate these successes. I think I can't do this. Like I honestly, 2:30 in the morning, I was crying because I hate writing. And I was like, I can't do it. Joe was like, you have to do it. I was like, I can do it. And I just, one more sentence. If I could just write one, you know what it is that cursor. That cursor just blinks. You ever have the threat of the cursor? Anyway, setbacks are a sign of growth. You want to make a reasonable timeline and prioritize. You want to take care of yourself for sure. Walk, run, bike, whatever you need to do. Eat well, and obviously make time for fun. Any questions? Any questions about what I do? I'm happy to share. If we have a minute, I can share what I do at the core in more detail slightly. If not, we're always looking for folks too. Do you have time, or you want me to get out the door? Okay. So Dr. Landis was right. I work at the core. I worked full time, and I got my master's. So any of you guys entertaining that, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Right now, I'm working on my dietetic internship through Sodexo, and again, I'm still working part time or 3/4 time, and I'm doing it there. So I'm a little crazy right now, but it's good stuff. Let's see. I mean, I worked like 20 hours a week at the core, but it's still, we're having a good time. So at the core, I've been doing it for 8 years, and I manage right now 7 research staff. We have contracts locally, so at UNC and at Duke. We've had contracts out of Boston. We have a couple contracts out of Colorado and some at Vanderbilt. It's really kind of cool to be in the environment that I'm in. A lot of what I do is business management, but I do the roll up my sleeves. I'm like, all right, let's get these recalls done. And that's really important when you're working with a team, that you, A, know how long it takes to do things, and that, B, they see that you are doing it, that you're part of the team. And that's what I tell my crowd. I'm like, I am the leader, but I'm also the team member. That's really important. My team, they work from home if they want to work from home. They have to build up to that, but I trust them. And so we do diet, physical activity, and body comp. Diet has always been the first and the strongest thing that we have. We do all types of diet research, and a lot of them include that 24-hour recall. So when somebody says, I'm doing 24-hour diet recalls, you're going to be like, I know what that is. You know what that is, right? Okay. What else? I have a lot of fun with what I do, and I'm really glad to have had this opportunity to, again, speak with your team here. And I'm really proud to be an alumni emeritus. So,
jobs like yours and people that you supervise, their job, I mean, are they fairly numerous when you look across the United States? I mean, a lot of colleges and universities?
No. There are not many organizations that do exactly what, I mean, they do, or they're very costly. Like what we do is costly. And what I've found as a business manager, because I do a lot of business, so a lot of my stuff is just administrative, like back-to-back meetings. I'm like, oh my God. But I'm like, what do I want to do? What am I doing? But there are a few centers that do it. I know Minnesota, the folks that own NDSR, they do it. Their cost, I think, for doing 24-hour recalls is over $100 per recall. Yeah, exactly. So that's why folks might be going, I'll do a food record. Well, just watch what you're doing when you want to do that kind of stuff, or I'll do an FFQ. There's a few other sites that do it, and then from there, it just drops off in its individual people. And generally, they're not doing it for like public institutions. Privately, you might get groups like RTI that'll have an in-house thing, although I'm very excited about this. Folks at RTI called me 2 weeks ago and said I think they have a CDC grant, which means they got the money in the pot. And I'm actually going to be looking for some people possibly, but it's a CDC grant where they want us to do 1,000 kids in like a month time period. It's just one diet recall, but I'm like, what? I think we can do it, but I may have to get a few more people. So anyway, if you're interested in that kind of thing and you don't, I don't know where you live, but you don't mind driving to Chapel Hill to come work, we're always looking. I've always taken my Meredith College people in, guys and girls. You're like the token over there. Like the token dude. But
a high quality guy.
hey, I'm not. No, listen. But I'm always looking for people. We have a lot of fun in what we do. You know, flexible work hours and stuff like that. But
yeah,
wear the headset.
Asking for like careers.
Oh, career. Yeah.
I mean, either working now or down the road.
As far as research?
Just just as a job. Once they leave or graduate or want to stay in the nutrition world or research. Or
right.
Research.
The thing about going, like say you were to graduate and come to me, I've had a lot of RDs even, but that's just sort of reflective of the market. I've had people, MDs, apply to be a research assistant. I'm like, I can't hire you. It's just the market. Like I had lawyers, I'm like, really? Did you read the job description? So right now it's a good time, like if you're a student, you want to make some extra gas money. Going forward when you graduate, it's to do what we do, it's sort of just boring routine work. And can we turn the video off? No, I'm just kidding. It's like you sit down and you do 24-hour recalls. Sometimes we have things that come in that are advanced, but I like to put that out there for graduating RDs or people graduating with a master's, is right now the level of work isn't such that it's, high brain level activity. We do have to write manual procedures. We do have to do lit searches and such, and that kind of stuff. But generally, I have 2 full-timers and a 3/4 timer. And so the full-timers have a lot of other administrative sort of duties that help keep the core running. But as far as going out and doing it, what I would say to do, if you wanted to get into nutrition research, certainly there are all kinds of organizations at UNC that are looking for research coordinators, which would be the equivalent of what I do. And so that's when you're wearing a lot of different hats. You're organizing the projects, you're following through, you're going to the meetings, you're writing the manual procedures, and you're managing staff. And then there's the other level, which is you're doing the data collection. And there's jobs at RTI. Where else? There's all kinds, if you just Googled or did a monster search on like research staff or something like that. So that's it.
Questions or? off the camera.
Yeah.